Following is paid programming. Welcome to Something More with Chris Boyd, certified financial planner practitioner and founder of Asset Management Resources, LLC, a registered investment advisor firm. We call it Something More because we like to talk not only about those important dollar and cents issues, but also the quality of life issues that make the money matters matter. Here he is, your fulfillment facilitator, your partner in prosperity, advising clients across the country, your host, J. Christopher Boyd.
Thanks for being with us, and welcome to Something More with Chris Boyd. I'm here with Jeff Perry, and we are both of Asset Management Resources. And Jeff, this time of year, we're thinking more about issues that can relate to politics, and I hear this from clients all the time. That they're already thinking about, well, how is the market going to be affected by elections next year, and things of that sort. And so you had identified an interesting topic that kind of brings in, how do investments get impacted by the political sphere, essentially, government, the president in particular.
Right.
But, maybe that's you can pick it up from there. But let's plan on talking a little bit about some of these things that are considerations people might want to think about.
Geez, you are surely correct that a lot of clients
it's on their mind for
it's
sure.
on their mind, and it's somewhat cheering or a booing situation, meaning a lot of people translate their politics, red team, blue team, onto their investments. So if you're on the red team, Republicans, and you have a Democratic president or Democratic Congress, you're thinking that the market will not perform, and vice versa. It's not unique to either party. Maybe a good topic to ask Brian Regan, our Chief Investment Officer, in the future. I know he's talked about it in the past, but it doesn't translate that way into reality, right?
Right.
But they do think about it, and sometimes it's the general thought, like, the policies of this next administration might be negative for the economy. What does that mean? So it's kind of a broader just perspective.
I hear more, from our listening audience, which tends to be more conservative in nature, where they're like, until we get this guy out of there,
right.
That kind of mindset.
That's right. That's right. So sometimes it's just a broader, like, if in this case, if Biden gets reelected, it's going to be terrible. I mean, and then sometimes it's specific, and that's what I think you were alluding to this past week. President Biden and his administration said that they were going to assert the power to seize drug patents, and this all in an effort to lower drug prices. And this comes off a piece of legislation that was actually passed in 1980. It was called the Bayh, Senator Bayh and Senator Dole, the Bayh-Dole piece of legislation, and it has what's a provision called March In, meaning the federal government, right, can use their authority to march in if this plays out. And in this case, it's march in to basically take control or nullify patents that drug companies have on certain drugs that aren't readily accessible or are very expensive, and force them to allow other companies to manufacture them or basically destroy the patent.
So the concept is, see if I got this right, that because there was some government funding for resources for testing of at academic resources, research, when drug manufacturers were doing testing, some of the testing was done by schools in the process.
Universities,
funded by the government. They're saying, therefore, this is public property in a sense, not subject to a patent.
So this is the March In right, which is part of this legislation in 1980.
And this has never been done before, correct?
This part has never been done. And actually, President Obama and President Trump considered using the March In rights that's allowed in the untested 1980 law, but they decided against it. I'm not going to speculate why they decided against it. There's a lot of articles.
I hate that we keep calling it rights, but anyway, okay. Sorry.
Well, that's actually the term, March In rights.
I know, I'm sorry, you know what I mean? But yeah, I'm sorry.
So, Yes. It allows the federal government, under the legislation, to break the patent of a drug or drugs that were developed with federally funds and not widely accessible for the public. But this would be the first time that officials, in this case the Biden administration, gives the reasoning of the medication price, which, if you listen to the scholars who are opposed to this, the legislation does not contemplate that price would be one of the reasons. So this is a lot of controversy. You know what it reminds me of, Chris? It's a totally different subject, but it reminds me of a number of years ago, before an election, President Biden said, "Hey, we're going to do student loan forgiveness."
Yes, it does sound very similar to this.
And all the scholars are going,
which,
not all the scholars, but many of the constitutional scholars are going, "You can't do that. That's unconstitutional."
right.
But it's a great slogan. It's a great policy to have before an election to get people to say, "Oh, I like this person. I'm going to vote for them because he's going to lower my medical prescriptions."
Well, it's funny. And we're picking on the Biden administration in that particular instance, but we've seen that with other administrations as well, where an effort has been continually made to extend the powers of the presidency in one form or fashion. Don't you think that this is not unique to this administration? Saw it in one that comes to my mind with the Obama administration with the consumer board. I forget what the CFP or whatever it was called.
Yep. Consumer protection. Yeah, it went way beyond his authority, and the court slapped him down. You can go back to President Bush after 9/11. Certainly well intended with the Patriot Act. I'm not questioning that or questioning the response to our nation being attacked, but
there's examples you can keep pointing to that this has been an ever increasing effort, I think, to strengthen, if you will, from the perspective of the executive branch, strengthen the executive branch's authority.
Jeez.
But it is an important principle that we're intended to have. The idea of no one branch has greater power and authority than any of the others, that they all work to keep each other in check. You know what I mean? Absolutely. And so that's the risk that these kinds of incremental encroachments tend to have.
So I'm going to go back and then I'm going to come right back. So don't worry about me here for a second.
Okay, all right, you got a point to make. Yeah,
our founding fathers were so concerned about when they created our system of government and the Constitution was ratified. Everyone was so concerned about us having another king someday, right?
Yeah.
And so they gave specific enumerated powers under Article 1, Section 8 to Congress, right? And, co-equal branches of government and a judiciary that's independent. They created a system to hopefully keep this power in check. Despite all that, both political parties, as we've just said, even today, are trying to expand the authority of the executive. And in many ways, Congress delegates that authority either by not doing something that they're supposed to do, or is purposely delegating the authority to the executive instead of enacting specific pieces of legislation. And we've seen this in the rise of the regulatory agencies, the president, and et cetera. So, I know we're going to talk about the recent Republican debate, and I think there's some examples there that show some hypocrisy among Republican candidates about the power of the central government. But let me come back. Here I come.
Okay.
So this also has not just a presidential power issue, but it also has, if you're a pharmaceutical company and if you're
there's a real pragmatic economic. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, everybody wants to demonize these pharmaceutical companies unless you have a loved one who is surviving and thriving and recovering because of some investment that a pharmaceutical company made in some treatment or drug or whatever it is that pharmaceutical company spent hundreds of millions of dollars or whatever the figure is to develop. Yeah. And how many investments do these pharmaceutical companies make in products, therapies, and prescriptions that never come to market because it doesn't work out?
Right.
And so,
Just had some talk about that just last week with some of these trials that weren't working out for one of the major pharmaceutical companies.
That's right.
There was just as an aside, there was a great episode on West Wing on this topic with the pharmaceutical companies and the discussion of like, well, it only cost X dollars to make these drugs. It was some nominal, money.
To manufacture them today.
Yeah, but the point is, but it takes how much to make that first drug, after all that requires all the research to make it, the efficacy of it all and all that.
That's
right. Make sure it's a viable treatment.
And
so will that penalize drug manufacturers to a point where they say it's not worth the investment if we don't know that our patent has power, right? I mean, that's where you're going with this.
That's where I'm going with it. There was one case back in, I forget the year. It didn't have to do with this general topic. It was in 2011, and the Supreme Court dealt with a question about who actually owns the patent. And they were very clear in this decision that the original, in this case, the drug company owns the patent. However, if a university or something made it better, made some changes, developed something, that they would own they would own that piece of the patent. But the quote from the case is that the basic principle of patent law is the original investor owns their own invention. And so that's the precedent, not on point. I'm not suggesting it's on point or determinative, but there is case law on it that makes it more difficult for the Biden administration to just march in, as the slogan goes, as the name of that bill, and take over someone's patent simply because of price. And once again, price isn't contemplated in the original legislation as one of the reasons.
Very interesting.
So a lot more to come on it, but
I think, look, I understand nobody's happy when costs of drugs are so high, right?
Right.
It's something that who among us hasn't been frustrated by the cost of healthcare? And if you're paying for insurance as an employer, or if you're paying on your own for your health insurance, it's astounding the cost. It's mortgage level costs, if not more, in some cases.
In some cases, it is more.
So I mean, it's an enormous expense. So it's understandable that people are frustrated by that and say, hey, what can we do to reduce that cost? The issue that we're talking about is the risks that come with encroachment of government powers, essentially. And when the idea of certain kinds of property being taken by the government in effect, right? In this case, it's a patent.
That is property.
That's I noticed in the debate there was a demonizing of that happened just the other night. There was a demonizing of wealth again, which I don't get. The idea that someone went from having a modest amount of wealth to a substantial amount of wealth, became a multimillionaire. Isn't that a good thing?
I thought it was the American dream, actually, to have the opportunity to work hard.
But it's funny also in the case, there was one multimillionaire criticizing another apparently multimillionaire for becoming a multimillionaire. I don't know. Their point was that they were on boards and things of this sort. But there's a reality that they're also out public speaking and doing all these things that get them good.
But it does make you wonder. Yeah, it does make you wonder not only about some of the criticisms, which are just politically based, but listening to the debate and some of the rhetoric by the Republican candidates, because the Democrat candidate we just picked on for a few minutes. So let's pick on the other side of the aisle.
Sure, right.
If you put me in front of the TV and I didn't know who these people were and I was just listening to it, I would think sometimes that I'm listening to a Democratic debate. And there's a lot of issues that I can talk about. A big issue has been the issue of abortion rights, and I suspect it will be ongoing into the 2024 election. And Republicans have been arguing since the passage of Roe versus Wade that abortion rights are not mentioned in the federal Constitution, which is what I was referring earlier. An originalist point of view, which I personally share and is a very conservative point of view, that if it's not in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, that issue belongs to the states. Republicans have been arguing that legally, politically forever. Now that that's been overturned, that portion of Roe's been overturned and pushed back to the states.
Yeah, and you have to add that it's also, and it seems to be a political liability in terms of the national elections. Right?
It does, but I'm more focused.
Isn't that the motivator for why this change of rhetoric is
maybe by some, but not by others, because I think if it is a political liability, assuming that is true, then why would you as a political candidate
well, that's a good point.
Talk about those issues and say what you would do as president? I'm talking about the power of the presidency, or the power of the federal government. Will expand it. And at least two of the DeSantis and Haley, two of the candidates saying that if elected, they would sign a bill banning abortion. Now they talk about the weeks and all that all over the place.
Yeah.
So
there's not consensus on what that.
But they're talking about the issue
be.
as if it is an issue that the president of the United States should be talking about, when in fact.
And that legislation, federal legislation, should be produced.
That is not a conservative point of view. It is not a legal point of view, as Republicans have been making for a long time, that it belonged to the states. Yeah. So now it belongs to the states, and you got two of the folks on the stage arguing.
Well, that was also a point that Christie brought out when he was asked about. Something about, I don't have the right phrasing, but gender surgeries or something, gender altering surgeries or something. I forget the way they phrased it, for minors, and that some participants on the stage were saying, "Oh, this should be, there should be legislation to, make that illegal."
At the federal level, once again.
At the federal level,
right?
And Christie's remark was, they were like, well, the moderator asked, is this are you out of step with the, Republican Party and, a conservative point of view? And he went on to say, no, the idea that it's very much consistent with a conservative point of view that we don't really want the federal government making these decisions for people, and that it's who better than parents to make decisions that might be relevant. Whether or not where you stand on that issue specifically, it's that point again that you see sort of a bifurcation within the candidates that are this tier of candidates.
Hypocrisy,
where how they view the role of government, and like in the case of DeSantis in saying, how the government should be going after corporations with, is that really a conservative perspective?
It isn't.
When, which the whole Disney thing that he had earlier in the year, I think it was maybe last year, but the issue I'm talking about, right?
I do. If you asked any of those candidates, if you asked them how high of a priority is parental rights to you, you'd get a very
high, right?
High. You'd be like, but then you say you're going to pass a law to determine what a parent should do with their child in this given situation.
Yeah,
it's my priority unless I disagree with your priority, and then I'm going to tell you what to do. And that is not a Republican principle. And I'm disappointed in some of the candidates who are talking about issues like that at the federal level. They should be pushing it back to the states.
There are a lot of examples, and in this kind of challenge.
Too many.
Yeah,
it's disappointing, but it is a campaign season, so.
Yeah. We haven't. Go ahead.
I was going to say the other part of the debate that is, I think, a bit humorous and disappointing as well is they're arguing with each other. They're ganging up on Nikki Haley, or, when they're all 30 points at least behind Donald Trump, and they either don't want to or don't feel like it's politically prudent, except for Chris Christie, of criticizing the former president. I mean, if in politics, if you're being criticized, you're winning, right? Because they're trying to knock you down. That's, from school committee to president, if somebody's attacking you, you must be winning. So why they're not going after the front runner? He's got plenty to go after.
Yeah,
is a bit odd.
It's puzzling. It's puzzling. I think what it is. Tell me if you disagree with this. Is it just that they're expecting his legal troubles are going to get the better of his candidacy at some point, whether it's because of a finding of something criminal that he will that will happen before the election is completed, that they'll be in a position to step into, and hope to capture some of his support, that they don't want to alienate that part of the party. I think that's most likely probable. With the exception of Chris Christie, who's out there saying this guy's unfit from like day one. That's his central theme. This guy's unfit. If you're a Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis, and that's your path to beating Donald Trump, is if he's taken out, by some legal process, literally or figuratively, you don't want to lose the base and have them not show up for you on election day. That's legitimate, but still, I still think you should be more critical. Yeah, I think they need to be. I mean, it's just the numbers are what they are. It's obvious they're not going to win in Iowa or New Hampshire if they're not able to undermine Trump's former President Trump's support. That's right. In the party. Yeah, well, we'll see. It's certainly we're 11 months away from the election. 4 months or so away from Super Tuesday. So it's going to be. And if you don't see consolidation soon, if people don't start dropping out, I mean, we have seen some dropping out. We saw a couple this last week or whatever. Right. But if you don't see that consolidation happening soon, the problem, becomes you have, not one candidate against another candidate, Trump in this case being the leader. Right. You've got Trump with a consolidated, lead, and all these, fractured other alternatives. I think after New Hampshire, the field gets much smaller, assuming. I do too. Yeah, it's a matter of money, logistics. I mean, if you're not winning and have a path to victory, your donors stop writing checks. So. And what is that, about 2 months away? No, January, right? January and February. Yeah. So not even. Iowa's a couple weeks away, and then New Hampshire, and then South Carolina. But I think after New Hampshire, it seems like a couple of the candidates are putting in all their eggs into that basket. Yeah. DeSantis, all his eggs are in Iowa. Yeah. And Christie, all his eggs seem to be heading towards New Hampshire. And Ramaswamy he's irrelevant. Seems to be less and less a factor, doesn't he? He's not. Although he's a factor in those debates, because he keeps he's kind of like a peck. He's kind of a nudge. Yeah, I won't say he's not a factor, I guess, because that's not fair, but he is not in consideration, in my point of view. All right. Well, we kind of went off on politics a little bit. There was a loose thread. It feels good to do it. I feel better, Chris. A little frustrated after last night. Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, a little loose thread for some financial connection, but in any case, more to come. We'll certainly be watching as we get closer to these caucus and primaries. So in any case, Jeff, thanks for the information, and join us next time on Something More with Chris Boyd. Until then, keep striving for something more.
Thank you for listening to Something More with Chris Boyd. Call us for help, whether it's financial planning, portfolio management, insurance concerns, or those quality of life issues that make the money matters matter. Whatever's on your mind, visit us at amrfinancial.com or call us toll free at 866-771-8901 or send us your questions to radio@amrfinancial.com.